Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at the first submission by Karla of her horse Mojo. Mojo is an interesting horse. That last picture is when she first bought the horse 2 years ago. He's a 12-year-old, evidently a captive-bred Kiger Mustang. So interesting horse. I've ridden a few and trained a few Mustangs that were actually wild ones, and they can be pretty amazing horses, some of them. If you get around to them, they can be quite dangerous. Now, this was a homebred one, so it wasn't really a wild horse, but you get the idea. But if you get a good one, they can be surprisingly good horses. So now we're going to see a photograph here. This is when she still got the horse. This is what the horse looks like now after a couple of years of this work. There we go. And you see his back is pretty flat there. Really pretty nice coming out of the neck. We'd like to see the neck a little more developed over the top line, but that's really not bad at all. He's really showed a big improvement there. So very well done. So now here he is now starting the stretch work. I really like that he's got a good active rhythm, though he just still needs to quite stretch down a little bit more. I mean, look very closely. When you see his neck come up, if you look closely, you can see how all of a sudden it changes what happens in the front legs. You know, he tends to want to pull himself along a little bit. Not as bad as many horses that we've seen, but a little bit of that. When he starts swinging, it starts to look a little better. Still a little tense in the neck here and needs to stretch a little deeper into that contact. Now, she says this wasn't her stretchiest day, so I assume that he even goes much better than this at times, and I'm sure will continue. But it certainly looks like you're on the right track headed there. Now, there's still a lot deeper place I want you to get with this horse. There's a moment towards the end of the tape where you really get him to a good place for a brief moment or so, but you see that it's all possible. Now this is starting to look better. All of a sudden the walk is starting to swing a little more, and we can see the underside of the neck beginning to relax. That's always what we're looking for. But always watch the front legs. You know, they tell you everything when you watch those diagonal pairs. That is, whether or not they swing exactly in unison. And that is really the hallmark of good dressage. And a horse can only be what we could say cadenced, which is that accentuation, almost like, think of it as perfect rhythm. What the old masters meant by that is when the front and the back end of the horses become in perfect unison with each other, then we can say the horse is cadenced, that we have that just perfect rhythm, like a metronome. That's what we're looking for. But that's what the old masters meant when they talked about cadence. Well, how is cadence different than rhythm? You know, it's cadenced when the horse is perfectly rhythmic between the two ends. Otherwise, it has no cadence. It has no rhythm. So this certainly shows to me that you're on the right track here. He's starting to stretch down pretty nicely in this. Just needs to be a little more active, so just continue to try to encourage a little more activity as you go and get him to stretch a little deeper. Now, one of the questions that she had was that, you know, once he's consistent in the stretch under saddle, how does she balance, you know, bringing him up from the stretch and maintain the throughness? Well, the answer to that question is you just simply let the neck back down. So if you can't maintain the head and neck in this particular position and keep the horse up over its back, you must let the back down. And you may find with many horses that they can hold the back up for a little while, just like somebody who's a really trained weightlifter might be able to lift 500 pounds a few times, but he can't just do it over and over again. So it's the most extreme thing that the horse does. So we just want to get the horse stretching down a little deeper into that contact, get a little more swing to the back legs, and once again, keep your eyes on what the back end is doing, and then an overview of what the two ends are doing together. If you watch, there was a video that just came up yesterday that we reposted, which was of Klaus Bachenhall, who was probably really the last great classical rider to win the Olympics. He was on a $3,000 horse. He was a policeman who taught himself to ride and trained this horse up through Grand Prix and beat everybody in the world. Once again, that's what everybody should be doing. And that horse was not a fabulous mover, but if you look at it, it does everything correctly and how it lifts the front end off the air. There's none of this leg snapping up like you see. But go back, and the point of this is to go back and watch that horse's walk, because that's the most telling thing. And that horse's walk is a perfect four-beat walk, as it should be. So just keep working for that little more swing in everything, really. Like here, this is not bad. He's about halfway there. Starts to get a little bit of stretch. I mean, he's not just totally pulling himself along by the shoulders, which a lot of horses with this kind of conformation do. Of course, they all do that if you make them hollow, always remembering that, you know, this horse right here is already more off its forehand than most of the horses at the last Olympic Games, because, once again, they may be hollow, they're just snapping their knees up. And if they're doing that, the movement is never efficient. Remember, that's what dressage was supposed to be all about, was developing the horse to a point that it could carry us easily without us interfering with its movement because of putting weight on its back. But also that goes beyond that point even, really begins to lift off the ground and thrust up to the back. Now what thrust means is the degree to which the horse pushes the back up and lifts the front end off the ground as it travels. So that's what we're always looking for, and that's what real collection is. But at this level, we won't see much of that. But actually, I'm seeing a little bit here. I mean, this is not bad, is what I'm saying, as it's headed in the right direction. He still needs to get a little deeper. You see right there, he kind of has a little bit of a sense of he wants to pull still. But that's going to come. You've already got him well on the way. He just needs to get his neck about a foot deeper or so than this. And once again, remember this issue about how low a horse should stretch. Well, in the beginning, they should stretch as far as they can go or need to go in order to get their weight over their back. Now, if you took a horse, a 5-year-old that's fabulous conformation and well formed over its back, lived outside its whole life, and developed correctly in the pasture, that is, spent its early life just eating off the ground and moving. That's why we have to go back and do the same thing. So when horses, never got the right start, which so many don't do today because people raise them in too small an areas, but they're never going to develop correctly if they don't. So with those kind of horses, we have to go back and sort of start all over again and let them take the time to develop what they should have developed out in the pasture, between 2 and 4 years old, actually from 1 to 4. As soon as we bring a horse in, that's why it's even more important. And people who live in places where there is not sufficient pasture, or they don't have sufficient pasture for their horses, and I'm talking about 50 acres, in my mind, it would be about the minimum to have horses out on that they can exercise enough to really help them develop. Think about what all those beautiful horse farms look like in Kentucky, And also notice the horse farms in Kentucky are always double fenced. The reason for that is that the horses can't fight over the fences, because that's where most accidents happen with people's pastures. So they put horses on either side of a fence, so they come up and they start fighting over the fence. I can't tell you how many horses I've seen with legs cut up from getting stuck in the fences and pawing between the fences. If they can't get to the other horse and touch noses, they're not going to do any of that nonsense. Now this is starting to be a pretty nice 4-beat walk. It's got a little glide to it here. It could certainly be a little deeper into the stretch, still got a ways to go, but the rhythm is there, and now it's starting to get really quite nice here. My advice to you would be to spend a lot of time in the walk, to everyone, always. I mean, I would never take a horse into the trot that isn't over and back in the walk. There's just no point. I would just put it back on the lunge line, if anything, or just start again the next day, knowing that I don't have enough strength to get what you want. So getting back to that idea of how do you know when to come up, you know when to come up as soon as you can go all the way down. You can start, and you have that consistent, you can start bringing the horse back up in the other direction. Now remember, that means just asking the neck to come up, not to pull the head back or the neck back into the body. That's the biggest mistake being made by most riders today, is they think that collection is shortening the frame. It is not the same thing. Collection, once again, is the degree to which the horse pushes the horse up into the air from the thrust of its hind legs, so the stride can still complete itself. So when you see these horses with the high knee action going around like saddlebreds and the hind legs are falling out behind, you know there is no movement through the horse's back. It's just the horse pulling up with its shoulders or the underside of its neck. Now this is going to be quite a nice walk here, and really very rhythmic. I can see that you're using your legs correctly. You're not just beating the horse to death with them. Looks like you're touching alternately from one side to the other, and that's exactly what you want to do. That's how the horse knows that we're going to ask for a trot. When we want to trot, we use both the legs at the same time. When we want a longer, more swinging walk, we would ask legs alternately. Now, we'd also ask the horse to move off from a standstill with both legs. But as soon as the horse moved off into a walk, we'd immediately start using our legs laterally, that is, individually, one at a time. Now watch as she comes by here. You can literally see how the horse's back swings in and out. See it? Right, left, right, left. So you can see how she lets her legs follow the motion of the horse, and that's exactly what you should do. Another thing that you're doing here very well is that you're sitting quite up straight. Looks very nice. You can always work to try to get your head back on top of your shoulders just a little more and flatten your shoulder blades into your back a little bit. So you just feel like you lift the top of your chest, and that lets you sit straight in the saddle below you. In other words, like having good posture from the ground, but with a horse between your legs. This walk is starting to get really nice here. Now we can see with this horse that there's still a little dip behind the saddle there, as you see, that will work out over time. And as you get the stretch deeper, you'll see that disappear. I like that you're keeping this work all to very wide circles and turns, straight lines, exactly what we should do. Remember that old saying, go forward and straight. But what the old masters meant by that, think once again, is in order to be straight, the horse has to lift its back. That's the only way a horse can ever be straight. It's the only way it can ever really be cadenced as well, of course, because the rhythm will always be slow, fast, or one rhythm behind the other. That is, when you see these horses in dressage throwing their front leg straight out from the shoulder, and that happens because they're bracing the neck back against the top of the shoulder. That's what makes that shoot out like that. But notice the back end is not coming through. So you can go back and watch that Klaus Bachenhall tape that we put up there, and see how in his extended trots the hind legs come through on the same plane and the horse stays lifted. That is, the whole body is lifted off the ground from the thrust. Really good here. I like to see how he slowed down a little bit there, and you put your leg right on, and he responded by swinging out a little more. Now we'd still like to get his neck down and out quite a bit more. So getting back to what I was saying before, the thing with the head and neck and the stretch, also if horses have no top line at all, their necks are going to hang straight down. When you get them to release those underside of their neck muscles, there's nothing to hold the neck up. So you just leave it wherever it has to be to let the horse work over the back, which answers the question of this whole argument about, oh, the horses should only be stretched this far or that far. But just notice if you leave them all the way down, eventually they will start coming up all by themselves, and that's exactly what they should do. Now, once the horse begins to carry itself in that rounder frame with a really engaged top line, then you don't need to stretch all the way down, 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 all the way down. You only need to stretch down as far as it takes to keep the horse over its back. So once you understand that, that answers all of those other questions about what you should do. You simply should bring the horse's pole up only as high as you can maintain the position of the back and the rhythm. And if you lose it, you let it right back down again, as we do throughout all our workouts. We never just keep a horse locked in a frame for the whole workout, just like a person. The horse is going to start to tire. Once again, you can see that dip behind the saddle. Keep that in mind, because as we see subsequent videos of this horse and rider, we'll be able to compare them. In fact, I would encourage everyone, this just gave me a little idea, which I'd like to add to the post, is that, I'd like everyone sending a video maybe to go back to their last video and put a little clip of what it looked like in the last one and then go into this one. Or the next one. But this has been a really nice walk here. It really has kept a really good rhythm almost all of the time. It could still be a little deeper, and it could swing a little more, as it does every time you get the horse to stretch a little bit more. We get a little better walk. And once you understand this thing about that we're training the movement, not the position of the head and neck, forget about that. If you get the best movement, the horse will be in the best position of its head and neck to do whatever it's doing. That is, to be in the best position. So, in other words, what the head and neck is doing should be a reflection of what the back end is doing. And conversely to that, if you look at a horse as being badly ridden, you will clearly see how that tight position of the head and neck, or shortened position, has shortened and truncated the gaits. Now, once again, if you have one of these new saddlebred dressage horses, we'll call them, which have just these exaggerated movement and everything is exaggerated, people are being fooled. That's just movement. And when you hollow them, that's why they snap their legs and their knees up instead of coming through. We have people now teaching horses to piaffe by beating them on the front legs, which is the most ridiculous thing. The fact that the USDF really was why I canceled my membership and will never join them again until they reform. They literally have a man who's part of their coaching system, whose system of training horses to piaffe and passage is by whacking them below the knees and the front legs. That should be a big wake-up call to anybody that's thinking about joining these organizations. In my opinion, these organizations like the USDF and the FEI have lost their mandate, because they're no longer protecting horses. They're protecting the riders from the media. And that's really a sad place to be. Go back and watch Klaus Bachenhall and watch the great riders of the past, Nuno Oliveira, Ivan von Neindorf. The people who were stars before it became something that somebody could learn to do in 6 months. But if you keep doing this, your horse is going to develop beautifully. And just like many of the other of these sort of Mustang horses that I've run into, this one has a pretty nice back end. You know, he moves quite nicely and freely with his hocks. And there are quite a few of them that don't. But I've seen some really good ones and have some had some junior riders on ones that they literally got as wild horses and did very well. But I love the smoothness of this walk. It just has a really nice rhythm to it, not completely cadenced yet, because the horse is not completely over its back, to put that thought in your mind. But it has a really good rhythm, a good reach. It can still just get bigger, and it will get bigger. We're always working on horses' walks, because that's where we start everything, you know. If you don't have a good walk, you're not going to have a good trot, and you're going to have an even worse canter. So get the walk correct, and then you can move up to the trot. That's the whole basis of how we do everything that we do, systematically. Then the horse can really understand what we want, because we're building on, just like, you know, if you go to learn to play the piano, the teacher doesn't have you play a different thing every day. Try to work on some different thing. You know, everything has to come along at the same time. For instance, you have to learn technique at the same time, for instance, that you're teaching the horse here. So you must take all the time it takes to get it consistent in one gait before you go on. Because, for instance, if you're not a good enough rider, all you're going to do is throw the horse out of balance. Remember, balance is something that is improved only by engaging the horse forward underneath itself. To improve the balance by slowing down is just that. You're just killing the stride of the horse, which unfortunately what we see so often today. But it takes a very developed rider. I mean, this whole idea that someone can buy a dressage horse today and be going FEI levels in a year, which is what trainers actually tell people these days. There's just no way. You can do it if you do it the way they do today, with a bunch of upside-down horses being held against the hand. But if you really want to ride dressage, it's going to take 5 years to develop an educated dressage seat, and that's working with someone every day. Klaus Bachenhall also says that in his book, which I recommend all of you to read. Now this walk is starting to swing even a little better here. Got a little slow there as you came around that corner. Try making your corners a little more like, for me it looked like you started to touch a little too much with the reins. Think of just turning your body into the position of the turn. And remember, the outside leg is so important in that. And if you don't know what I'm talking about there, go back and watch my video on the outside leg. It's called Secrets of Dressage. And that is to let your outside leg come back from the hip and not from the knee. And that puts you in the position of the turn. That is, one leg is back. So you have a bend. It indicates to the horse to bend, and that puts the weight immediately on the inside seat bone. Saves you all the trouble. So that walk could have got a little bit deeper. It had a good rhythm to it and had moments that it really got quite nice. It just needs to get more consistent. So before I would come up into the trot the way we're doing here, I would like to see the horse a lot more consistent and deeper into the stretch. Now, I'm not telling you not to do this. You get to a good place, and it sounds like she's already getting more stretch out of the horse than what this tape is. But just be sure that you are. Same thing here. This trot is not bad. It's kind of halfway there. I wouldn't call it, but there's still a bit of tension in the lower neck. I still get a little feel the horse is kind of pulling a little bit and not quite getting enough thrust up through the back yet. Now you have quite a good position, by the way. It's like your saddle fits you pretty well. Can't tell that much about the horse without seeing a more close-up picture. But I like how your toes are lifted mostly and your heels are basically down and you're nicely over your heels most of the time. I think you could try to just stretch up a little more and just, once again, just flatten that shoulder blades into your back and try to keep working. Believe me, I work on this every day. At my age, I have to do enough yoga to keep my head up on top of my shoulders, which is very important. People don't realize how if you can't stand up and be balanced standing up with your body in a perfect position, once again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, take some yoga so you learn how to align your body all the way to the ground with the most. And of course, the straighter we are, the more in balance we are with the ground, the less effort it takes us to work. And that's the same thing true of the horse. And so if you have variance in your own posture, that's going to show up when you ride. So if you want to improve your riding, the number one thing I could tell you to do is improve your posture. Now, once you have good posture, you'll find it much easier to learn how to ride. Or if you're out of shape, I mean, to even think about trying to do what we are doing here with horses, and to be simply out of shape or out of balance with yourself is going to make everything harder. Now this is starting to look pretty good here. We start to get a little more swing. It's getting a little deeper. Once again, you can see that dip behind the saddle there. Now that starts to get a little better. Notice how the underside of the neck now is starting to relax. There. Now look at the hocks now. We have a rounder, look at the whole horse in general. So kind of got a little slow here again, but it was really good on that last half circle over there. Started to really reach into it and get quite consistent. Still here, same thing. It's just to get it a little bit deeper than it is, but it's a pretty consistent rhythm. Not a lot of thrust yet off the back there. It gets a little deeper. Watch right there coming that corner. It always gets a little better right there. But he just still has quite a bit of ways to go deeper into the stretch before this is going to be fantastic. But once again, this looks like you're well on your way. I mean, quite frankly, if you didn't even know anything about the rest of what's supposed to happen, if you just threw the reins away and just sent the horse on with your legs, you'd be better off than the people trying to pull their horses into some kind of frame. You will never win that battle. You can break the horse and think you've won, but you've really lost because now you have a broken horse. And that will always, you will end up coming a cropper one day, as the British used to say about people who fall off in the hunt field. That is, you'll be without a horse. Getting a little bit deeper there. It never quite gets all the way to where I want it to be yet, but you're very well on your way. And I love what a nice quiet rider you are. You're making demands that are well within the scope of this horse's capabilities. Now, were it I would have already come back to the walk rather, sooner. And if I didn't get the stretch all the way down, I'd come back to the walk after this little trot work and try to get it deeper and then go back again. That's always the rule, remember. If you run into a wall in what you're doing, you take a step back and you do what came before it and then try the other thing again. And remember, we never punish horses for being wrong or not being able to do something that they're physically incapable. But that's what we see all the time. The average so-called dressage rider would walk in here and say, pick up those reins, and your reins are too short. Pull his head up, pull his head up. And pretty soon they'd have you trotting around in a sitting trot with the horse completely hollow, which is what we watch every day. Happily, I don't have to watch too much of it where I am, so that's a good thing. But, for someone like myself who grew up in this, going to a horse shows today is almost like going to some strange alternate reality where everything that you held to be true suddenly seems to be being completely ignored, and no one is even acknowledging it, and it's turned into something quite different. But where is the harmony? We should, even at this level, and this horse does that for him now. It has a good steady rhythm and it's quiet, so it's kind of mesmerizing to watch, which is what real dressage is. Once again, Nuno's comment about, the most uneducated person about riding will have a solemn sort of cathartic experience watching a horse, like anything that's beautiful, watching a beautiful ballet. It will move you. And we hope what all art does is move us to be better people, right? And certainly the practice of arts. You don't ever have to become a famous rider to get all the benefits of riding that the famous rider is getting, and sometimes more. If a famous rider is famous for doing it in the wrong manner, which so many are today. And this is really swinging quite well. As I said, the biggest thing that I would have just come back a little sooner to the walk, got the stretch a little deeper in the walk, and then go back and try again. So more intermittently is what I'm saying, if he's not all the way there. But once again, this is not looking bad. I mean, this is really quite a good start in the right direction. Not completely released on the other side of the neck yet, nor thrusting up into the back yet. But if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to get there. I love how nice and relaxed the horse is. No swishing of the tail. Obviously, not putting up a big fight because you're not asking it to do something it can't do. Even if that's stretching, you can't force a horse to stretch. Now that's looking much better there. And once again, watch every time the neck gets a little bit longer. Look how much better the flexion is in the hocks behind. Remember, gaited horses, like 5-gaited Tennessee walking horses and these kind of things, and Tennessee walkers and saddlebreds, you gate them by hollowing the back. I grew up around all this stuff when I was a kid. Fortunately, I had a father who pointed it out to me and pointed out the horrors of it all to me. And once I knew what that was, I mean, the idea of having anything to do with that was, anathema, so to speak. Now this is starting to look really good here. Much, much better. Getting a pretty nice swing to it. Still just needs to be that little bit deeper, but you're almost there. But the rhythm is really fantastic. If you keep doing what you're doing, this is going to turn into a beautiful horse. I actually would like to do one of those Mustang challenges one of these days if they still have that. We need somebody to sponsor that. There's an idea. Anybody want to sponsor a Mustang? The Mustang Challenge? I think it's $1 million prize or something like that. That'd be a good thing to do. Really nice coming back to that walk there. I like how your seat just quietly set in the saddle and your seat didn't interrupt the stride of the horse. Also important. We see so many people, all of a sudden they jam their back into the horse. This idea of doing halts where you jam your back down like you're doing a sliding stop. If you watch people practice that, it just, it's such a futile exercise, and that the more they halt, the worse it gets, and then they start beating the horse up and trying to two whips in each hand, trying to make it stand square. When you work your horses over their back and they're straight, they just stop square. It's as simple as that. We hardly ever practice halts. We have, like one a day is what we practice. Maybe once in a while a little more than that, but that's about it. You want your music to flow. I mean, imagine if you were listening to a symphony, it was stopping every couple of minutes. Well, that's what it has to be. You lose the sensation of watching this beautiful creature if you keep stopping. And once again, I think that training can be beautiful at every level all the way along. This was very beautiful to watch, and will even be more beautiful when you get the horse's head and neck down. So people can really start enjoying the lower levels instead of this. People now get involved in dressage, and then it's just this crazy push to try to go Grand Prix. When that alone is just so far beyond most of these people's capabilities. And we see so many horses being ruined. These beautiful big horses, they get in the hands of these beginners, and they get all shut down, and they're wrecked. I see it at every clinic that I go to. But this has been really, really good, Karla. I look forward to seeing Mojo here again in the not-too-distant future. When you come back here to the walk, this is the best we got and the best stretch. I still want to see that a little deeper, but you're well on track to what you're doing. Go back, start working a little more work in hand. If you don't remember that, go back and look at my website and watch the things on that. I just put up a new one about that, too, that you can watch. And that will help you get him stretching a little deeper in hand before you get on him. Once again, it's always better if you can teach something from the ground before you get on the horse, because then it's less confusing for the horse because he's not having to deal with your weight at the same time, which takes horses quite a while to really get to that place where you can just get on. They can just instantly keep their backs up underneath you and stay there without you starting to move. So I know there's things that we do. When you see people doing flexion, standing still, and bending head and necks from side to side, none of that does anything because the horse isn't moving at all, except it might pull his head down. So really great work here. You're well on your way to doing the job. and you seem like you really have a good understanding of what we're doing here. This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride. Congratulations on doing such a great ride, and I look forward to seeing your next one with a little deeper stretch.